Welcome to today's video. Today we're going to explore the new generation features for support lines that will be available in Builder 2019. And we're going to use an existing model that was created in Builder 2018 and show some of these new features and how the program was generating tributaries relative to the placement of support lines and splitters and how it will generate them in the new version. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and open up the program. This is actually Builder 2019, even though this isn't yet to be updated. We're going to turn on Edge with Floor Pro, and we want to have the PTRC option enabled here. So we'll open that. And this is a model, again, that was created in version 18. And we can see if we turn on the splitters, I'll go to Floor Design, and I'll turn on the X direction splitters. We have quite a few splitters here, we have some over here, and mainly around openings and where we have terminated support lines that end up either the start or the end inside of the slab boundary. And in the opposite direction, we can see that we have even more splitters. And this was necessary in order to get the right tributaries to be created. And most users are familiar with the use of splitters and some of the detailed nature that can go along with inputting splitters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually turn on the splitters in both directions, and I'm going to delete them. And in so doing, we're going to go back to Floor Design, and I'll generate the design sections old. So this is really the old method. And when I do this, you can see there's a warning. There's probably errors in how the strips were generated just because it's looking for those splitters. If I go to the X direction, for example, we can see these enter the opening, which technically isn't a big issue, but a lot of times we want to see these design cuts stopping at the opening face, for example. That's why we had some splitters around these openings. Over here, we can see this support line is actually overlapped by this one that I've highlighted, and that's because we don't have a splitter at the end of this support line and also here. So this is a good example of some of the new functionality that will really help users and making the process of generating the strips easier. I'll go ahead and I'll discard the old strips, and I'm now going to generate the new strips. Okay, and we've generated the new strips. I'm going to let me go ahead and just turn off these tributaries, turn those layers off, then I'll just reset the view here. If I now look at this direction, we still have this entering the opening. Again, technically that's not an issue, but what we'll focus on mainly for the time being here is we'll look at this. We can see that the program can now generate the strip based on your input of support line nodes without the need of any splitters. I did not put a splitter as I would have done in previous versions, something like this and maybe something like that. Those are no longer required. So splitters, by and large, will only be required as a boundary to terminate the width of a tributary region. I'll give you an example. If we go ahead and we say, okay, we do want this support line to stop at the face of this opening. I'm going to add a splitter. This will be still an X direction splitter, but I don't have to be as specific where the splitter snaps. Here it's easy to snap because I can click on the endpoints of walls. There's one splitter, another splitter might be there, and then another one might be here. And over on this side, I might want a splitter along there, and maybe one here. Okay, and so when we do that, and we generate based on the new, we'll go back and reset this view again. We can see the program now bounds off the tributary based on where I placed my splitters. So this is a nice new feature with just easy creation of support lines using splitters really just to truncate the width of a tributary where needed. If I go ahead and look at the other direction, This direction had quite a few more splitters initially. We can see that this breaks these tributaries out just fine without the need of any splitters here. We get over to this region, and this strip really stretches all the way over to here. That's because this one stops. So we might want to just say, well, I'm going to put a splitter here so it stops at that splitter. And again, similar to what we did for the X direction, I'll use a Y direction splitter, and I'll just say that this tributary really just needs to stop, let's say from here down to there. And when I do that and I regenerate the strips, we can go back and look at that. This tributary stops, as does this one. Okay, so those are some nice new features with generation of strips. Now, in this case, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to delete the support lines and the splitters, and we're going to show some new features relative to just generating the support lines in the software. I'll go back and delete the design strips, and we'll turn the splitters on and the support lines. Okay, and I'll just go back to Home, select by type, splitter and support line, and we'll delete those. So we're going to lay out the splitters, or excuse me, the support lines here using some new wizard features for support lines. We could still do this the old way, kind of manually, where we create X and Y support lines, just how it's been done in the past. The handling of those is a little bit different, like we just showed. We could also use the dynamic editor for strip modeling. And the editor allows us to edit or input support lines. So we're going to use the wizard now to do the X direction. And you'll notice there's an option, create unique support line for beams. That means if there's a beam at a specific location, if we snap on the beam endpoints or near the beam endpoints, the program will automatically create an isolated support line for the beam. And we'll actually add a beam here just to show that. We'll go to the option for beam, and I'm going to add a beam. Let's add one there, and we'll add another one here. Okay, and we'll go back to Floor Design, Wizard, X direction, and we'll go ahead and start creating these. So I'm going to click a line here. This is a red, we call it a ray, and the ray will be snapped. If I just simply go all the way along here, the program will pick points along that ray, and you'll notice that it places a point. Let me close out of here. I'll pause this. It places a point at the slab edge, supports, and beam. Notice that this is still continuous. It does not actually break the beam out. That's because when I created the ray, I clicked on point 1 and point 2. I didn't click on the beam. So I'm giving you an example of how we can isolate this one beam. Okay, so there's one example. I'll go back and resume. Now I'm going to go point 1. I'll go 2, 3, and then 4. And now if I pause this, you can see there's support line 1. If I go to support line 2, we have this as a beam automatically. And there will be options in the 2019 version to have the program calculate the effective flange properties of the beam and to use those for design. So this is one way to more easily generate strips where we have beams as well. We'll go back and resume. Similar to beams, if we want the program to snap on walls, we have to treat the walls in a certain way. So if I want to have points snapped on each endpoint of the wall, I'll just click near the wall end. It doesn't have to be at the wall end. I'll snap near the beam end, and then I can just go all the way through like so. And you can see we have, let me pause that, we have points at the wall ends, and then we have an isolated support line for the beam. Remember, there's no need for splitters in this case, and we'll go ahead and continue. So over here, I'll just go like so. I want this point to be snapped to, and I want this point to be snapped to. And there's the next support line. We can do something like that, like this. I want to do one along here. I might want to do one along here. and then all the way through. Okay, and those are the support lines for the X direction. If I now generate the strips, we'll go ahead and close this. I'm going to generate the strips new, and we can see we have no need for use of splitters in this case, unless again we wanted to bound off the opening for some reason. Then I could add the splitters like I had done in the previous example. Now we have a situation where the section cut intersects the wall, this wall right there. So we may want to terminate these cuts at the face of the wall. And what I'll do is we'll go back into the wizard. We're going to go to walls. And for the X direction boundary, this will be colored as blue. We're going to select walls that are assigned as a boundary. Okay, so we'll go ahead and set this to a X boundary. It looks like the colors here actually mismatch, so that will be cleaned up. But if we go ahead and pause this again and we generate the strips, now you can see the program truncates this cut and it actually extends it just off the face of that wall. Same thing on the other side, so the program doesn't cut into the wall. And you can use these wall options to be recognized as boundaries or no boundaries. If I go back and I say no boundary, in this case, I'll set this back to no boundary and then regenerate. Let's pause that. You can see it crosses through the wall again. So the generation of strips is much easier. There's some new tools here within this wizard that allow creation of support lines much faster and more rapid than previous versions. One other thing we'll show here is the display. So if we show direction, criteria, limit, and we refresh, you'll notice that the program will display that information. Let me go back into that. For X direction, it will display information for the support line. So here we have direction X, criteria two-way, limit is none. The limit is associated with how wide we want the tributary. So if we double click on this strip, this is a two-way slab. Under design sections options, you can see there's some options here for design section limits. So we can now include the maximum spacing per section or the maximum number of cuts per span. Previous versions, it was always number of cuts per span. We now have the option for spacing with a minimum number of sections. Tributary width limits. Here, if we say I want this to be user defined, and maybe I want this to be 5 feet, and I go back and generate the design strip, this is limited to 5 feet. And using the dynamic editor again, showing that information, we'll refresh that, and let me turn the strips back on. Now we have a limit of 5 feet. If you have any questions about the upcoming version, please contact us at support@adaptsoft.com. The anticipated release date is August or September 2019.